In today's video of Path of Exile 2, I'm going to be going over how you can put together a really nice build for your Stormweaver, perfect for anyone that likes using Spark, and on a very tight budget of just 100 Exalted Orbs. I'm going to show you how to go from a lowly sorceress with absolutely no gear whatsoever, all the way up to one that's viable to run some of the endgame content, all the way to the tier 14, 15, and even some of the tier 15 rare maps. This is what they look like after they were fully kitted out. Obviously there's room for improvement, we weren't able to grab everything with perfect modifiers on it, but I'll be giving you some hints and tips on how to make the build powerful and how to make it even better than what I was able to do myself. Ultimately I've been running tier 15 maps absolutely fine with this, all of the resistances are maxed, the mana regen's not bad, not ideal though at around about 500, and the mana I would have liked a little bit higher because mana equals damage, but it also equals our health pool. Just under 4.5k mana. Makes us a little bit on the squishy side, but I've still been running tier 15 maps fine most time, as well as quite a few of the rare tier 15s as well. Just have to be a little bit careful of some of the bosses, because if they hit you too hard you do fall over, so this definitely isn't for a hardcore build. But as long as you can take them out of range, you've definitely got the damage to do so, and there's a lot of room for improvement by enhancing your gear further and picking up better stuff as you go. Maxed out in the Sigil of Power, we're hitting pretty decently with our Spark at just over 50,000, and for anyone that's newer to the game, if you're watching this and you've just started it and you're thinking how am I exactly supposed to get all of these Exalted Orbs, just remember as soon as you're able to run the Chaos Trials, you can pretty much pick them up nice and easy. I'll chuck a link top right just for anyone who's struggling with currency. Right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to put some footage in the background showing my character clearing through some tier 15 maps, and then you'll be able to work out exactly if it's your playstyle, if you enjoyed content, and if it's something you'd be aiming for your build. Overlaying that, I'm also going to be showing you what I managed to pick up on the trading site and ways that I'd definitely improve upon it if I spent a little bit more or got a little bit luckier with my mod rolls. First one, and one of the main things you're going to be after, because this is going to be your damage, is obviously going to be your wand. For this, you're going to want to make sure it has one thing before all else, and that's going to be your plus to the level of your spell skills. If you can't get this, plus to level of lightning skills also works out really well, but the main thing you're going to be after is going to be +4. I was only able to pick up +3 because at the moment the trading's a little bit overinflated, but try to aim for +4 because it's going to make a massive difference to your damage. If you can't though, aim for +3 and then try and get it with some really nice cast speed and some extra spell damage if possible. The reason I purchased this one is because it only had 4 modifiers on it, so I knew I could roll some in and hope for the best, and the ones you'll definitely want on it is going to be a really high mana roll, level of skills, increased cast speed, and then like I said, spell damage or lightning damage as well. I was able to get this with mana per enemy defeated, and then luckily when I slammed it with a couple of exalts, I was able to boost its spell power. Next, something you 100% want to do is to make sure you buy a staff with Sigil of Power on it. Try to get the cheapest one possible that's got a really high level on it, pretty much whatever you can equip on your character. And at the time of me purchasing this, because of my level, I could get level 18 on it. Over to our body armour, and for this chest piece, you're going to want to make sure it's got spirit on it. That's going to be one of the key things, and as high as possible to that would work out ideal. I wasn't able to get it very high, only 39. But it's something you're going to need to put on if you want to have that cast on shock effect going on. One thing I like to look for is to have extra mana regeneration rate going on as well, and don't forget, trying to get maximum shield is going to factor into how much mana we've got going, so try to get your energy shield on the piece of gear that can have it as high as you possibly can. This one was good but by no means excellent, but for the cost of 5 Exalted Orbs it hit most of the markers I was after. Extra intellect, extra spirit, extra shield, and a little bit of resistance. The only thing I would have loved to have on this, because I found out later on you do definitely need it, would be stun threshold instead. That would make this a much better piece overall. For the amulet, you're going to want to make sure you've got spirit on it, and between this and the body you have to have at least 60, but you're aiming for 70 if you want it to be ideal. Then you're going to want plus to level of all of your spell skills. I can only manage to get +2, because again it was only 5 exalted, but if you can get +3 it's going to make your character much stronger. As well as this, try to get some increased spell damage, and intelligence definitely helps round the build out. Luckily I was able to use some Exalted Orbs on this, and one of the modifiers I rolled was +15 to all elemental resists, so that really helped me out in order to round the resists off. For the headpiece, again aim for that maximum energy shield and increased energy shield as well, and then on top of that try to get yourself some maximum mana. The higher the better with maximum mana, try to get on every single piece you can, and as well as that, if you can grab intelligence, that's also going to work out perfect. Then we were able to get a couple of resists on, because you want to make sure you max those out in your build. This is probably one of the only pieces I think I could have got a little bit cheaper, because I paid 10 Exalted Orbs for this one, and that's going to be the gloves. However, they were pretty nice overall. 90% increased energy shield, high maximum mana at 164, as well as 28% to our cold resistance. We also gained 43 mana per enemy taken down. If you could, you probably want 2 resists on your gloves, but if you find things are too costly again, go for what I have and get one that hasn't got all of the modifiers put on. For our belt, extra mana regeneration from flasks is really nice. Armour does not help us in the slightest, but it has got quite good maximum mana. Other than that, use it to round out your resistances, so grab whatever you need for them. And then for the stun threshold, you're going to want as high as possible. Definitely better than what I had at 115. Hopefully you'll be able to get on the 200 plus mark. For our boots, one of the most important things you could do is make sure you've got increased movement speed. You're going to want at least 25 if possible. And then after that, try to grab yourself some maximum energy shield and then some maximum mana. The reduced attributes did not help us in the slightest, so they were kind of a had to have because we needed to get something a bit cheaper, but it did give us some nice cold resist and something I wanted to aim for as well, which was reduced freeze duration on yourself. Try to get this as high as possible. If you can get above 50, that works out ideal. For the focus, and I really wish I'd have spent a bit more time on this one because it was not the best in the slightest. It's not bad, but definitely could have got better. You're going to want to pick up increased energy shield, increased lightning damage if possible, extra to your maximum mana, a lot more than I got of 63, and if possible try to get +3 to your level of spell skills. I could only get +2 because these were really expensive at the time, and then after that try and get a bit of intelligence if you can, or I believe you may actually be able to get cast speed on this one as well. If you can, you may want to get hold of that one. As well as that though, try and get a resist on it if possible, as that's going to help you to get them all maxed out overall. Now for our ring, pearl rings are absolutely amazing if you want to boost your cast speed. And with this one, we got 7% increased cast speed as its normal roll. Then we got extra lightning damage, maximum mana, increased cast speed, and then a little bit of resistances. For the other ring, this was the last piece I needed, so I made sure to finish off my resistances first and foremost. This was done with a ruby ring of 29% to fire resistance straight up. Then after that, if you can, try and get some lightning damage in there, so 22% increased lightning damage for this one. Then of course maximum mana and increased cast speed if possible. I always like to have a little bit of to all attributes if I can, because that really helps when you're slotting your support gems. But remember, if you don't want either of these two rings, then try to get one that's a breach ring in order to get your whole bunch of extra mana. Lastly for your kit, you're going to want 2 things. The first thing is going to be your 4-in charm. Try to get this with a little bit of extra duration and a chance to gain a charge when you're taking enemies down. And then for your mana flask, you're just going to want to make sure this gives you as much high mana as possible. And as well as that, if you can make it so it doesn't consume as many charges, that also works out ideal. Lastly, for our tree, we've gone into the sockets a whole bunch, so you're going to want some nice jewels to enhance this. What you're going to be looking for will be any jewels that you can pick up quite a cheap rate, which is actually quite hard in today's market. But I was picking these all up between 1 to 5 Exalted Orbs. What you're going to want on these is anything to do with boosting your damage, but also, if possible, ones that recover a certain percent of mana on enemy defeated. If you can get the 2% ones, that's absolutely amazing, but I found they were too expensive personally, so I had to opt into the 1% ones. Then on top of that, anything that's going to give you some damage, whether it be an elemental damage or spell power, or even a little bit of crit damage can help as well, even though we haven't spec'd into that. And of course there's always the option of cast speed, but I think we've actually got enough of that, so personally I try and get as much pure damage overall as possible. So after all of those purchases, we've managed to end up with 13 Exalts over, which I think is pretty good, especially when a few of them we managed to use a couple of Exalts on anyway in order to see if we could get some nice modifiers on them. And just quickly looking over our gear, it's not really too shabby whatsoever. I would have definitely liked if I could have got a little bit more mana in my build and a little bit more stun threshold, as that would have just rounded out the build a little bit more, and because our mana's health, the higher we can get on it, the better it's going to be for our build overall. However, as a starting point, this is great and allows us to run through pretty much all of the maps, all the way up to tier 15, even on the rare category, although you do have to be a little bit mindful of some of the enemies and some of the tougher bosses. Play at a distance is definitely key and can help you massively, and all we're going to do now, with the 13 Exalted Orbs, is try to upgrade whatever we've got left of our gear as much as the currency will allow. Anything that's missing a slot, we're going to chuck that on, then chuck in the runes in order to boost our energy shield, and then finally we were able to grab hold of around about 20 armor scraps in order to boost our gear a little bit with their quality. So after we've managed to upgrade as much as we possibly could, we've not done too bad, to be perfectly honest, but we have had to avoid the rings as they were a little bit more expensive, so we can still upgrade those if you had more currency, allowing you a better build overall, giving you a little bit more survivability and damage. The gloves to just +1, so there's a lot of room there to improve. The chest was purchased at +20, so that's absolutely perfect. The helmet we've got to +20 as well. The other ring, unfortunately nothing on it whatsoever. The boots to +20, and finally we've managed to get the focus to +10 as well. So there's a little bit of wiggle room, you can get a bit more out of this build, but overall we've now got 4,362 mana, which equates to life, so make sure you're very careful with that, because I would like it a little bit higher. Around about 5.5 would be absolutely ideal, but this isn't bad for a really nice budget build. All of our resistances are capped, and I managed to get quite lucky with this amulet as we were able to slam it with a couple of exalts, and I managed to pick up +15 to all elemental resistances with it, rounding our resistances off nicely, and we've got a total mana recovery of around about 505. For your rotation and playstyle, what I tend to do is Spark most times is pretty much enough to take most things out, but I do tend to use a lot of flame walls as well because you want to take things out of range. This build is far from perfect because you're on such a budget and you can get one popped because of your low health, but I find this is quite rare on standard enemies and only when I'm getting overwhelmed or if I'm unfortunate on some of the bosses. So what you want to do is play to your advantage, make sure you're at range whenever possible. If you're against the toughest foes such as bosses or rares with some really tough modifiers, don't forget you can always curse them, but the main thing is you want to go into your Sigil of Power because that gives you a massive boost to your damage, and then if you want to add a Flame Wall, take them out of range, or you want to chuck down Orb of Storms, or even both if you can. But if you do this, make sure you pop a mana potion, otherwise you're going to be struggling with a little bit of your mana, but this will generate a whole bunch of damage and allow you to take out enemies very fast. So jumping over to our skills, first one, don't worry about it, this one comes straight on the wand, you don't have to invest in this whatsoever, and obviously every single one will be different. What you do need to worry about though is having a Sigil of Power. This is absolutely amazing and it's the whole reason we purchased this stuff, so just make sure you've got it with a high level of skill. So with this one, we've got level 18 Sigil of Power. The awesome thing about this, it's going to gain extra stages when you stand in it, so pop it on the floor, sit within its vicinity, and absolutely use it to decimate some of the toughest enemies around. Perfect for your bosses and those really tough rare monsters with some tough modifiers. Now I believe this works as standard as just for set 2 if you put it there, but if it doesn't, then you're going to click under your skill options and there should be a setting here that will say allocate it to 1 or 2. You want it just on the 2 category. I thought I'd already set this, but it may be because it's attached to a weapon you actually can't change it. However, you can change all of the rest, and for these skills you're going to want to attach them to weapon set 1. So for example, we'll go down to your Spark, click on skill options and make sure it's just with used set 1. Do this for pretty much everything other than the Sigil of Power. This is just going to make things a whole bunch easier, as when you do your rotation, you're going to straight away swap to the Sigil of Power, then when you use anything else, it will go over to your primary weapon, which will be the wand, and you'll dish out much more damage. Over to your conductivity, whenever you want to hit them with a little bit of a negative, making your damage a bit more boosted, you're going to use this, but a lot of times, honestly, you'll only be using it on the toughest foes again. Then, for your supports, you're going to have persistence, as this is going to give you a little bit more additional time for it, then a magnified effect, giving you a little bit more AoE, and lastly, Curse Grand, debuffing them a little bit once more. Over to Flame Wall, and one of my favourite skills in the game, I never thought it would be, but this thing is an absolute monster. Everyone talks about Spark, but I think Flame Wall is a beast of a move and works absolutely ideal with Spark in most situations. Use this whenever you want a bit of range on your Spark and things are further afield, but it also works really well on bosses because it gives you a great bit of additional damage. Projectiles that pass through the wall do 126 to 181 added fire damage. And again, this can go up dramatically. I believe it hits around about the 100k DPS or nearabouts, and absolutely devastates everything in its path. Don't be afraid to pop it on top of a boss's head, as you saw earlier in the video. That does great damage as well, especially when you follow it up with all of our kind of rotation, and the only one you really need on this will be Fire Mastery in order to give it one extra level to the skill. Orb of Storms, I found this very helpful if you're getting overrun. Chuck this right beside yourself, and then the supports you're going to want on this is going to be Font of Mana, giving you a little bit more mana regen again, Lightning Exposure because we haven't really got much of that going on in this build, and then Conduction, as it's going to allow you to get a little bit more extra shock. Helping with one of our things later on, which is going to be just down here at Cast on Shock. Over to Spark, pretty much our main spell we'll be using, And this is a whole bunch of damage, and the great thing about it, it covers such a wide area that most times you're going to be decimating enemies before they even make it over to you. The ones you're going to want on this is going to be Arcane Tempo. This is going to help you with a little bit of that cast speed. And then you're going to have Acceleration, allowing those projectiles to just rapidly go out and defeat your enemies. Inspiration, which is great because it means this skill is going to cost less. Without this, you will not be able to run this build at the moment. You just have not got the mana regen. And then lastly, Considered Casting, which knocks down some of your cast speed, but we've got an absolute ton of it anyway, but allows us to hit quite a bit harder, giving us 40% more damage with spell hits. Archmage, like I said, we have not boosted this anywhere near as much as we should do, because I think if you're looking at this video, you probably haven't got it to 21, as they are an absolute fortune, or you've got to have a lucky drop. But if you have got that, you're going to have an absolute abundance more damage, because I believe it goes up to 9% of damage as extra lightning damage for each 100 maximum mana you have. Remember, this does cost a little bit of extra mana to run, but it is definitely worth using, and without this, your damage drops dramatically, so make sure you've got this on at all times as your main spirit gem. Over to Clarity, this one just helps a little bit because it gives you increased mana generation rate while a supported skill is active. And then lastly, Cast on Shock, we're going to be shocking absolutely everything, and when we are, it is going to proc Lightning Conduit, which hits like an absolute truck, and again takes advantage of that shock effect. 100% more damage with hits per 5% shock effect, so try to shock everything as absolutely much as possible. That's where the Orb of Storms comes in, just up here, so if you want to put it on the bosses, you definitely can do, it definitely help out. And the other one we're going to be using is going to be Impetus, which means our skills gain 40% more energy. And lastly, Energy Retention, skills triggered by supported skills have a nice chance to have their energy cost refunded by half. This again helps because you don't want to be losing out all of your mana, because your mana's life, and that's what keeps you from falling over. Lastly, and I'll try to make this a little bit brief because I'm sure I've taken up enough of your time, but for your skill tree, we've picked Stormweaver as our ascendancy, and everything I've put into this build was up to around about level 78 or 79 with our passives. What you want to pick up is Mana, Constant Gale to make sure you've got Arcane Surge, then a little bit more mana, and mana is just essential in this build, you're going to want to pick up that whenever you can, and then Force of Will, 1% increased effect of Arcane Surge on you per 15 maximum mana. We are going to invest fully into that, and once we've got better gear and a few more passives, we'll be absolutely boosted through the roof. If you've got more points to spend, then you're going to want to bop just down this way, pick up your increased chance to shock, targets can be affected by 2 of your shocks with strike twice, shock chance again, and then finally Shaper of Storms. All damage from hits contributes to shock chance. This will mean you shock rapidly, it's going to be pretty crazy and it'll be a lot of fun, but that's something to work towards, and for the moment you're going to need a little bit of extra mana to keep you afloat. For our skill tree, you're going to want to start off on the spell damage node just here, make your way up, over to more spell damage, and just keep making your way through, picking up all the extra spell damage and the intelligence just here. Then if I zoom out a little bit, we're going to keep going up this way, keep making our way through, picking up all of the extra skill damage as we go. If you need to swap anything over to dexterity or strength in order to equip your sport gems, then do it, but I think I can change this one over now because I forgot about it and I've got some on my gear. Keep making your way up to this middle path in, and then you're going to head all the way down to the right, picking up all these intelligence nodes until you make it just over this way, because you're able to pick up Essence of the Storm. Gain 5% of damage as extra lightning damage and 30% increased chance to shot. Make your way just over a little bit more, as this is going to help you with your skill costs, and then make sure you pick up Conservative Casting, giving you 20% increased mana regeneration and 8% reduced mana cost to your skills. Then you're going to keep heading up, and at this point you're going to branch off, just so you can pick up your jewels just over here, allocate all of the ones you saw earlier, and after playing around with it a little bit, I'd probably say you could take away from some of the 1% of mana ones and get a little bit of extra damage in here if you wanted to. Then you're going to go all the way left, keep socketing all of your jewels, make sure you pick up this one here, Mind Over Matter, then you're going to go over into this tree in order to pick up all of the elemental damage, and finish it off by picking this socket up just here. Then a little bit further down, you're going to want to pick up these ones just so you can get into the 4% increased maximum mana once more. The energy shield unfortunately doesn't seem to activate on your skill tree as it does on your actual gear, because we've swapped everything over into our mana. Lastly, down this way, pick up another of your sockets for your jewels, pop over to this one, and then make it over to Mind Eraser. 10% increased mana regeneration rate and 6% of damage taken recouped as mana. Later on you may well be able to take out of this, but for the moment I found it helped quite a bit. Heading all the way to the top, you're going to want to make sure you pick up another socket, then go all the way up and pick up some lightning damage. So 2% increased lightning damage per 10 intelligence is absolutely amazing. Then you're going to want to head down here and pick up arcane intensity in order to get 3% increased spell damage per 100 maximum mana. Of course, you'll want to grab Eldritch Battery, as this thing's an absolutely essential for doing a lot of damage, as it converts all of your energy shield to mana, and mana is our source of damage, and as I've said about a million times, also our life. Up the top here, you're going to want to grab a little bit more intelligence, then make your way through, keep going all the way down, pick up all of your jewel sockets. Make sure Chaos Inoculation is one you've picked up as well, as without this you're going to fall over constantly, and then just keep going all the way down to the right hand side. Reason you're coming down here is that this node is an absolute monster to get hold of, and that's going to be your Wild Storm. This one ups your damage massively, and although you can do without it, is definitely worth having just for tackling some of the tougher foes. Now remember, this was around about level 78 or 79, and I'd got up to here. And from there, what I'm going to do is make my way all the way around the outside, picking up all of the jewel sockets and all of the intelligence nodes as I go, until I finally make it all the way down to here, and then I'll pick up Lightning Rod. Lightning damage with non-critical hits is lucky. This means you get 2 rolls of it being higher damage, and because we've not spec'd into crits whatsoever, this will work out absolutely amazing, especially because of how fast we'll be hitting things. Ultimately, this last bit might change if I find a better setup, but that's what I'm going with at the moment. It will help us to have a bit more spyability because of how much intelligence we'll be grabbing, which will be changed over to mana, upping our damage again, and grabbing this node, which I think will help us out massively. Overall, I've been having an absolute blast with this. They do fall over every once in a while because it's not perfect, it is a budget build, and some of those modifiers on those tier 15 maps is absolutely crazy, but most times I find it's if I've been caught out or not paying attention on some of the tougher bosses. But yeah, hopefully this helps you guys and girls out. There's going to be a load more content away from me, hints, tips, guides and builds, and a more defined one of this once I've boosted it up a bit. As always, for all things gaming, take care. I'll see you on the next day.